entrepreneurs with a profit motive, and this has never worked. I mean, there have been all kinds of intellectuals who thought they knew more than the market, that they can allocate resources and make everybody's life better, and they end up making everybody's life miserable because it doesn't work. And that is where we're headed. And the people who think, oh no, this will never happen, again, they're the same people that said everything was great a couple of years ago, that real estate prices could never fall. Or they say, well, if America goes down, the whole world's going to go down, so you're going to... No, the whole world... I think that we are on the verge of a renaissance outside the United States. It's going to be like, we're liberating the peasants. It's been a revolution. Because we're like a royal... America is like a giant, royal court. And we're just partying, and we're extracting a tax from all the peasants all around the world that have to support us, because we live off of their productivity. And it's not going to hurt them if we stop consuming, because if we stop consuming, they're not going to stop producing. They're still going to produce. They're just going to get to consume it instead. And that's actually the fun part of the whole process, right? It's enjoying the fruits of your labor, not laboring. And that's what's going to change. People think that demand is the key. Demand means nothing. Supply is the key, right? Everybody demands things. I have a 7-year-old son, right? He wants everything he sees. It's innate. I don't need to stimulate his demand. What gives meaning to his demand is my ability to buy the things that he wants. And the same thing is true of me, right? I flew here on a commercial airplane. I'd rather fly here on my own private jet. Why didn't I do that? It's not because I didn't want to. Right? I'd like a 700-foot yacht with a submarine and a helicopter, and a whole staff of women. Why don't I have that? Right? It's not because there's not. I don't want it, and if I need government stimulus, I can't afford it. And the same. When the first plasma TV came out, everybody remembers when they first came out. How many people actually bought one when they first came out? But everybody wanted one. I thought it was like, oh, man, that's really cool. I want one of those. Why didn't I buy it? It was 10 grand. That's why I didn't buy it. And now 10 grand was a lot of money back then. But now I have a whole bunch of these plasma TVs because they're cheap, right? So what enabled me to buy it? Was it my demand? No, I always demanded it. It was supply. It was the manufacturing process. As companies became more efficient and were able to produce more TVs, that's what enabled me to buy them. It was a supply coming up. My demand was always there. And that's the same thing. The rest of the world is going to function fine. There are people in China who want things. We try to pretend that Americans are unique in our desire to consume, and that without us, nobody would want anything. That's all nonsense. Right? It's like people can imagine there's a factory worker in China, and they're making washing machines for clothing. And as they're working on these things, 12 hours a day working for low, they're making these things, and they're thinking to themselves, "Gee, I'm glad I don't have one of these." Now, I just prefer to do my laundry, with a rock in a stream in the backyard. Or you think the Chinese like riding bicycles to work in the rain? You don't think they prefer to have a car? It's all a question of what they can afford. But meanwhile, they're producing all the stuff. They actually can't afford it. We're the ones that can't afford it because we don't produce it. But the governments are changing. China has $2.3 trillion in reserves. That's $2.3 trillion of purchasing power that was transferred from Chinese citizens to Americans. Think of all the things that Chinese could have afforded if the government didn't take all that purchasing power away from them. That's all going to change. And when it changes, it's the same thing as prices coming down. The minute the Chinese government depegs the currency and lets the dollar sink, that's like putting everything on sale for the Chinese. Everything they want to buy gets cheaper. They'll buy more. And it's like everything that we want to buy gets more expensive. We get priced out of the market. That is what is going to happen. And what we can do as individuals, unfortunately, you can help me in my campaign, and we can try our best to prevent this disaster from happening. And if for some reason I get to Washington, I'll do what I can to talk some. You see how long I can talk. Imagine if I was filibustering on the Senate floor. They would know I was in that Senate. Barack Obama would have to listen to this. In fact, C-SPAN might be one of the most popular shows, networks, if I get there. But I'm not going to, I'm going to hope for the best, but I'm not going to invest for that. Because for me right now, all of this, I'm just going to assume that this trend is in motion until it changes. And they're going to keep making mistakes, right? Politicians, we got this gigantic fire that they lit. And they only know one way to put it out, and that's pour gasoline on it. And the more gasoline they pour, the bigger the fire gets. All they can think of is, we need more gas. That's it. And I'm going to try to get to Washington and take those buckets of gasoline away and get them to understand it. But if they don't, we have got to invest like that. We have got to understand that assets in the United States are going to lose a lot of value relative to assets in other countries. Right? And this is going to happen because of a realignment of exchange rates. But think about it. If Americans are going to be poor, which we are going to be, right? Your consumption is really a function of what you can produce. But we've been able to consume as a function of what everybody else has been able to produce. That comes to an end. So we're going to have to live within our means. And unfortunately, our means are a lot lower than they used to be. And until we really restructure, until we get a real stimulus, which means less government, right? Government is a depressant. Government saps the productivity of the real economy. We have to support government. That has to come out of our productivity. When you're a rich country, you can afford to have a lot of government. But when you're a poor country, you can't. And if you're a poor country that wants to be a rich country, the key to that is shrinking your government, making it as small as possible, so it doesn't interfere with private citizens creating wealth. And so if we don't do that, we're never going to be able to recover. But in the meantime, if we as Americans have our money outside the United States now, we can preserve it. And I think there are a lot of opportunities around the world. I think there's going to be a lot of volatility. I can't promise people in this room that if they invest at Euro Pacific Capital, that we're not going to have to live through another year like 2008. I was surprised at the severity of the downturn in 2008. I hadn't really planned for it. I knew it was possible. I thought that weak foreign markets would have been shielded by the weakness of the dollar. Instead, the strength of the dollar exacerbated that. But I also, I'm a bit surprised by 2009. I mean, 2009 is, without a doubt, the best year ever for foreign stock investing. I mean, no other year even comes close. And so, I don't know, 2010 could be another 2009. I don't know, for sure. But I know that over the long term, over the next several years, over the next decade, I think that people are going to lose a fortune in the United States. Because the government is trying to make sure that nobody loses any money. And they might succeed. Nobody will lose any money. But all the money will lose its value. And so what good is having money that doesn't buy anything? There are plenty of millionaires. There are billionaires all over Zimbabwe. They can't buy a pack of chewing gum with those billions. Right? So if you want to preserve your wealth and enhance your wealth, you got to go abroad. We're investing at Euro Pacific Capital. You can talk with the brokers at the back, but I like stocks more than bonds, especially when you can buy them cheap and get a good dividend. There's inflation all around the world right now. All central banks are acting irresponsibly, so I'd rather own assets than paper. But there's a lot of value around the world. There are great dividends. If you want to invest here, there's no income. There's no dividends. You can't get interest on anything unless you take a tremendous amount of risk. There are a lot of companies around the world paying very high dividend yields, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10% or more. We're investing all around the world in the resource economies, in European economies, especially Asia. I think that the real dynamism is going to be in Asia. I mean, we are actually living through a period of time right now where we are passing a baton, unfortunately, from American economic dominance to Asian dominance. Asia is doing everything right. We're doing everything wrong. I mean, they're doing what we used to do. They're saving their money and they're making stuff. And why are they doing that? Because the government, even though they're communists, they're smart enough to leave the entrepreneurs alone. There is more freedom in China than there is in America, economically. Yeah, they can't vote. Big deal. We can vote. Look who we vote for. And then look what they do. We get to vote for which guy's going to take half our money. I'd rather not vote and have the person not take half my money, or more. I mean, taxes or inflation are going up. So that's where all the wealth is going to be created. So you got to have a lot of exposure to that country. I mean, the stocks that can go up 10 or 20-fold or more, that's where they are.